Welcome to the Conjugate Nation podcast.
All right, we are back. I was thinking about that I'm doing the editing about our intro, and I feel like I need to. We got to work on it. I feel like I'd like. Do you guys have the big friendly giant? I think it's just friendly giant. You guys have friendly giant in America?
Canada's the only place that's friendly, okay? So
that might just be a Canadian thing. Friendly giant. He used to it was like an old guy, and he would tell stories. But at the start of every episode, and he was like a giant. So he'd adjust the tiny little chairs at his feet, and he would you could gather around. There was a giraffe, I think, and a rooster, maybe.
Nice.
Maybe something more like that. I'll work. I'll get some ideas together. Okay, so we got just the three of us again for the first time in a couple episodes. Pretty excited about it. Couple things we're going back to. So those shout outs. I've got a couple for sure. I've got Ingrid Poole, Cooper Palmer, and Michael Brennan. All thanks to those people for reaching out with questions, engaging a little bit, sort of past what we're talking about, and appreciated. Thanks for listening. Chris, I think you had a couple as well.
Yeah, Zach Holden, CrossFit Iliad. Been getting after it with the conjugate stuff and some competitors he's training out of there. And then Nick Tomlinson, he's doing some sports performance stuff with some softball players, and pretty cool to see how people are, implementing the conjugate system, because a lot like CrossFit, this can be done a number of different ways, but pretty cool to hear how they're doing things.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks everyone who has reached out. I mean, all of us really enjoy, we're doing it because we enjoy engaging and sharing knowledge, information. And when people sort of reach out and show that they're listening and pass on sort of any feedback or things they have, comments, queries, conundrums, etc., that they are appreciated and thoughtful. Past that question. So I think the one that's come up the most and most recently for all of us has been maybe what each of us does as far as what we offer. So I mean, the one thing we've had with the podcast, it's a lot of sharing of information. We don't really have anything that we sell. We don't have sponsors or anything like that. We're just kind of getting together and sharing knowledge to hopefully be more helpful to people. But if the things are interesting to you and you want to know more, I think each of us kind of has some variation on what we do. So, Shane's got the seminar. So maybe, do you want to start, Shane, by talking through what you get up to?
Sure. So there's a few things. I own a gym called the Sweatshop. This is in Cincinnati, Ohio. Really well known for powerlifting, but I work with athletes for all different sports. And then also we have the Conjugate powerlifting course. So I do a course with continuous education credits, Conjugate powerlifting, how to use that for weightlifting, for CrossFit. So a lot of CrossFit coaches and athletes, people typical who would attend the course. And so you can go to conjugatepowerlifting.com and you can find that there and see a schedule of places that we're going. Or if you own a gym, you can reach out to me if you want to host. I also do on WODfollow, we have the Conjugate programming, and that programming is for powerlifters, CrossFit athletes from beginners to all the way up to a games competitor as far as the difficulty of it. It's all scaled down according to what level you're at. So I work, with athletes remotely, and I work with them in my gym. And what I'd say is, for me, I just like working with a person who has the right personality type, someone who's going to be disciplined about what they do, someone who's open to learning. I believe that when you work with somebody, like a gym should be like an educational facility. So it's not about me looking for the highest level athlete. That's my job, to make people stronger, make them faster, make them better at what they do. So don't worry about the level of athlete you are. Worry about where you want to go and what your discipline levels are. And that's kind of what I do and who I work with.
Courses are all over the world. I looked recently and you had a bunch in Europe coming up this next couple
in
months.
October, I'll be in Madrid in Spain. I'm looking to set up a course in somewhere like maybe England or maybe somewhere in Italy for the weekend before, the weekend after. I haven't posted that yet, but I'm looking for a course somewhere in that direction as well. But they're nationwide. I've done them in all 50 states. I've done them on every continent except for Antarctica. So I've been all over the place teaching courses. And we're pretty willing to come out about anywhere.
Cool. Chris?
Yeah, and I'll just caveat onto that. I got to recently take the course from you, Shane. And if you're interested in the conjugate system and you're not sure about like how to implement it, and I don't get any kickbacks on any of this, is just a review for myself. But it was just an awesome course, like ties everything together. I've known about conjugate for a while. Got to see Louis do his way back in the day, but to see you and Leanne do your thing, if you have the opportunity to do that and you're serious about doing conjugate training, like getting hands on is, I couldn't recommend it more. As far as things that I'm doing, I'm working in Portland and Fort Vancouver. So CrossFit X Factor, CrossFit Fort Vancouver, I'm in there training. So if you're around those areas, I'm happy to, meet up with you. I do some remote training as well, some mentorship stuff. But yeah, man, anything I can do to get the word out and help others, I'm down.
You just started getting into teaching classes in Fort Vancouver.
That's cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, yeah. What a iconic gym and just some amazing people there. It's already made me better. So yeah, I'm stoked to see what happens in a year.
Yeah, that's an awesome gym. Super excited. Lucky to have you. Yeah, that is cool. That's real cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. For me, I run and own Squamish Barbell out in Squamish, British Columbia. So we're about 45 minutes north of Vancouver in Canada on the West Coast. Always super stoked to have people drop in, come hang out, join us to lift or join us for a class that's kind of goes on with our area being high tourism. We see that kind of like all the time, which is always super fun. Past that, I don't do any remote coaching currently, and I don't have any online stuff available currently, just because it's pretty busy these days. But past that, the one thing I have started doing this last bunch of months and really have enjoyed is like online consult. So one thing that I've really enjoyed is just like booking anyone who's interested. This has been all kinds of different athletes from different sports, as well as coaches and gym owners, like CrossFit gym owners, who are just kind of keen to, they have a bunch of like specific questions or questions that really relate to them as athletes or their group of athletes or their gym specifically. And I book a handful of like one-on-one consults a month that I just do over FaceTime or Zoom, whatever works, and really have enjoyed those a lot. Found like I like that kind of engagement. I love talking about what we do, and look forward to like doing more of that kind of stuff. Past that, that's all the things. That's what we do. So if you could be more help to you and something of that resonates, feel free to reach out to us. Okay, with today, one of the things, we got a sort of whole bunch of topics that maybe loosely fall into a category that we haven't got a great title for at the moment. But we're going to talk maybe of the soft skills side of training today, a little less of the technical and programming side, and a little more of like athletes training with others, engaging with the coach, and dealing with more sort of the sort of mental or sort of psychological development. I think, what was Russia? The rule of threes. They would do 3 years where they tested you physically and psychologically before determining which sport you would attend. So this is the other side of that. So one of the pieces I think we're going to kick it off with was talking about motivation. I think this is a really common one that comes up with CrossFit gyms, especially with people getting started, and just feeling like that's a piece that they struggle with. And then I think maybe more importantly, feeling like that is something that they don't have as much of as others have or should have to be successful at, CrossFit or sport or healthier lifestyle. And I mean, I would argue that more important than motivation, and this is certainly not my own piece, this is more from Jocko and his guys, and definitely found this to be the case with myself, is I think motivation comes and goes. And I think it's less important and less valuable than it gets credit for. Or is that right? Less important, less valuable than it gets? I think that's correct. And more importantly is discipline. Is that actually just being able to hold yourself accountable to whatever you're up to, accept that it's a process, accept that you're going to have setbacks, and that no one setback is the worst thing. Only the end of the world is the end of the world. and being able to learn what you can and move forward productively from that process and worry less about what you accomplish on any given day or week and more what you're accomplishing over the sort of macro cycle of time and what you accomplish sort of in the year, in many years. I think it was actually Joe Friel. He was a triathlon guy, right? He wrote the Triathlon Training Bible. And I think one of his things that really always I remembered was, I think in Triathlon Training Bible, he says, athletes always overestimate what they can accomplish in a season and underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade. That's definitely been myself as a coach and athlete personally, for sure. And I think that might be other people too. Thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a great saying because, ultimately when we're looking at people's like bench press, squat, are they running a faster 10K? Are they doing a faster Fran time? People look at where they want to get, and from where they're at. They don't look at the steps along the way. And, what I mean by that is I taught a seminar one time. I was talking to this group. We're talking about Olympic lifting. I'm like, I want you to do overhead presses once a month for this particular group. And, the goal would be to add 5 pounds every time you do it. And the guy in the crowd says, that's not enough for me. Like, okay, well, how much do you weigh? 145 pounds. What's your overhead press? 155. How long have you been training for? 5 years. Okay, so, if you put 5 pounds a month on your overhead press, that's 60 pounds a year. In 3 years, that'd be 180 pounds. That's making gains substantially faster than what you made the first 4 years. So how's that not fast enough? Well, he's like, well, I never thought about it like that. I'm like, and you're not going to put 5 pounds a month on your overhead press. If you can get chip plates and gain a pound here and there, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 1. It doesn't matter. Just try to keep it moving, right? And, that's the point, what Jesse's talking about is like people think, okay, I'm going to knock X amount of time off for the Ironman in 1 year. And if they don't do that, I want to knock an hour off. Well, they knocked 45 minutes off, so they feel like a failure. It's like, no, you knocked 45 minutes off. If you could do that for 10 years, you don't even need to do that. If you knock 10 minutes off a year after that, for 10 years, you knock out another 100 minutes off that 45 minutes that you already knocked off. Now, what kind of times are you going? Is that a time that you ever expected to do in your lifetime? But they don't, they look at the gap instead of taking one foot in front of the other. I was told a long time ago when they talk like selection process and special operations, they're like the guys that go through like, say like Hell Week, right? And they look at how hard first day was and they look at how many more days they have of it. They're the ones who quit. It's the guys who just one more step, one more step, one more step, one more step, one more step. And all of a sudden one day they're like, hey, you're done. No, I can keep going. No, you're done. No, I can keep going. And it's like, no, you passed, you made it. You did what you're supposed to do. They're so worried about one more step, one more step, one more step. They're like, I'm never going to quit. I just need to get one more step. Those are the people who make it. They worry about those tiny little increments, and those increments add up.
Yeah, I think Jocko said that he always just thought about just getting to the next meal. That was my only thing I was worried about. Like, just get to the next meal, and I'll worry about that when I get there. I think motivation's a great kind of segue potentially, and I think as coaches, where we can really kind of make our magic, and obviously we have a great understanding of physiology and creative adaptation, but if you can't modify behavior, then none of that really matters, right? So motivation, think about, we have the games in 2 weeks. So the games are going to be going off, like how many tens of thousands of CrossFitters are going to be like, man, I'm ready. I've been watching the games. I'm going to be fired up. This is my new training schedule. And then what does that look like, 3 months from now? And this is every study that you see on 30-day challenges, 60-day challenges, like you've got an 80% drop off once that ends. So it can be an opportunity.
The games is like the New Year's of CrossFit.
Resolution for CrossFitters.
Totally.
100. I'll be that guy. I'll be super fired up after leaving the games for sure. So like to me, motivation's cheap. It doesn't mean anything. It can be a segue to get people into a program, and then at that point, I think this is where I think two things. A great community can help a lot, like community, whether it's inside your CrossFit affiliate, community being like, do you have great training partners that can help keep you on track? But the reality is that you got to learn how to do the job when you don't want to. If the goal is what it is, you're not going to be able to, you're never going to have motivation 365 days a year. You'd be lucky to have it a couple months. Like, it's the people that can keep grinding during those times when they're not motivated, those are the people that are really making the greatest changes. And those are the people that are really training the mental toughness of not just even in sport, right? Like this doesn't have to be CrossFit. This could be business. This could be, a number of different things. It's doing it when you don't want to. If it really means that much to you, you got to do it when you don't want to.
Chris hit the nail on the head. When you're talking about discipline doesn't always, it's not just, I show up and I hit the gym every day. It's not just that I eat the nutrition plan I'm supposed to get the result that I need to get. You have to teach discipline because it trickles down into a lot of areas of training, and the higher level the athlete you are, the more areas that seeps into. And I can give you a good example. I was training an athlete that was a world record holder in the squat. And what I always said is I first need an athlete who's disciplined and ready to go. Okay. But once you have that athlete who just is chomping the bit, they want to go, 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 go. Now the separator is, I want the one who can stop. And that sounds really weird because you always think, like, I want the one to go, go, go. Yes, they have to go first. Once they're willing to go, once they're willing to train, once they're willing to do whatever it takes to win, it's the person who will listen when to take a break. When that training's enough, don't do one more thing. That's the one who's going to go farther. So I had a person who was a world record holder in the squat and came in, we're doing a Circumax phase. And our Circumax phase tells us what we're going to lift. So if you hit a 20-pound PR on Circumax in a squat, you hit a 20-pound PR in competition. So this athlete's going to go for a world record squat. And so it's really nice to go in and hit your PR on your Circumax phase because you know it's a done deal when you show up to the competition. So it takes kind of the pressure off. Well, my athlete showed up in the morning sick, wasn't feeling good. And I've been working on their mental capacity their whole career. And they go up, they hit a lift, and they need one more attempt to hit a PR. And I already had my thought process. And I was going to shut it down no matter what, but I want to see what the athlete had to say. And so their training partner says, oh, you got another one. You can hit a PR for sure. And my athlete turned around and said, you're right, I can hit a PR. I have a choice on what day, though. I hit a PR on Circumax phase. I'm not going to hit a world record at the meet. If I just relax today, recover, I know I'm stronger than I was in my last meet. I can hit a PR in the meet. I can't do both, though, because I'm recovering from not being well. I can't do both. That's exactly the right answer. Most people would have to go after that PR so they can tell themselves, like, I'm going to hit that world record, like I'm capable now, and to take pressure off of them. But but an athlete who has the right mindset, the right discipline to go, no, I've already done all the work. I'm not feeling well today. I'm going to recover so that I'm successful on competition day because that's the only day that matters. That discipline didn't start there. That discipline start first, don't miss your workouts. Now execute the highest capability that you have in those workouts. Listen to your coach. Follow your nutrition plan. Make sure you're getting the proper sleep that you need to recover. And if you do all those things in discipline and you keep making those right choices, then eventually it bleeds into those areas like I just explained, where they make the correct decision before a competition. When mentally everything's telling them, hit that lift so you know you're good enough. Hit that lift so you know you're good enough. And they're like, no, I already know. Follow the plan. I know how the body works. And I know what I need to do. And this is the direction I need to go. And there's just one more thing I'll say before you guys can move on with this. I suggest on Instagram, like Tosh Crooked Butterfly, follow his stuff. He's got a lot of great stuff for mentality, thought processes. Great guy, does amazing things, and he gives back to his communities, which is something that everybody should do. I also like Trident Mindset. Chris Smith, is one of the owners of Trident Mindset. And they put a lot of great content out. But Tosh said something that I really liked his explanation. I think it's a phenomenal way to explain things. And it's something that I think opens the door for people who might not think they're as mentally tough as they should be, and they're buying into that they're not mentally tough. And he said, that every single day we have a series of events that happen to us. And during that day, we have choices to make. And some of those choices you can take the easier route out, or you can take the correct route. And a lot of times the correct way, the way you should take, is the harder way, right? So he's like, you can take someone mentally weak, but if every day they start making the right decision, not the easy decision, the correct decision, and if every decision they do is the correct one, the more correct decisions they make, they become mentally tougher, mentally more capable. But you can also take someone who's mentally strong, and if they start taking the easy way out, over and over again, they can actually train into themselves to become mentally weak. So don't be afraid if you're like, I'm just never been that really just that strong person who never gives up, never quits. I'm in and out, I'm inconsistent. That's okay. Now you know the roadmap. Now you know what to do. Start day by day. The next choice that comes up in front of you, make the correct choice for yourself. Don't take the easy choice. Take the choice that will give you a higher quality life, higher capability mentally and physically. Okay? And if you do that every day and just take it one day at a time, eventually you won't even recognize yourself. A year, 2 year, 3 years down the road, you'll be a completely different animal than you were before, extremely highly capable, and you'll be able to deal with so much more in life than you did before. So there's people like that out there that are doing amazing things. You know, both the guys that I mentioned have done absolutely amazing things in their lifetime, and they help other people do amazing things, you know, with their lives. So something simple like that, every one of us can be mentally strong. You just have to take each, you know, each situation in front of us and make the correct decision. That's really it. Don't overthink it.
That quote that seems to keep popping up now. I think I heard it first with Joe Rogan, and then it's rattled through a whole bunch of podcasts that hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. I like that. I think there's a couple pieces in there that that I specifically like, is that hard times create strong men. Is that inside of like, you know, depending on your background, what your life is like, I mean, you might need to impose hard times. And that's where like the CrossFit gym can be that. That's where your nature, your training, like, you know, don't shy away from those hard times, because good times create weak men. And so if you've got a comfortable life, you know, you've got a good house, good relationship, good setup, happy, job is good, all these sort of things. These are good and good times. But without applying some pressure to that and continuing to maintain the skill of like toughness, mental fortitude, is that I feel like you end up with an animal at the zoo. Like that might have been a lion at one point, but that is not a lion anymore. And so I think it's very important that, and I've thought a lot about this with my life. For sure. I grew up on the farm. I was there until I was like 18 or 19. When I was 18, when I left home on good terms, but we got the opportunity to go work wildland fire. So I graduated high school early and left to work full-time wildland fire, and then spent 12 years in the bush doing that job full-time. Oh, well, like seasonally full-time. And then in the off season would travel. I, you know, did a winter in Australia fighting fires there. I traveled all over the world climbing and running distance, et cetera, et cetera. And then got into CrossFit and opened a gym. And now I'm sort of like indoors worker instead of outdoors worker. And that for me has been a piece where like I worry about my tolerance for just being able to work in the rain for 12 to 16 hours and not really think twice about it. And those sort of pieces. And I think it's important that I really lean on the powerlifting programming that I do personally to really still get uncomfortable and be uncomfortable for a couple hours almost every day, right? Like when I'm in the thick of my training, I'm getting in sort of like the 4 primary days, which take me about 2 hours and change. And then 2 secondary days, which take me, you know, about an hour. So with those, I'm getting about 10 hours where I try to spend that time sort of like enjoying being uncomfortable, and then making sure that I'm not shying away from that. And to me, I feel like that's important. And there's that discipline piece of that. And I think from time to time, evaluating where you sit as a person on that cycle.
You know, training and competition is controlled adversity, right? So, you know, when he's talking about easy times make, you know, kind of weak individuals, you know, and that will eventually lead to hard times. You know, if you've been a strength coach or personal trainer long enough, you'll run into somebody who's been ultra successful in business. They have a great marriage, they have kids who are intelligent, they have a great business, money is never going to be a problem, they have a beautiful home, they can travel anywhere they want, take whatever vacation they want, and that's awesome, right? But then they think they made it, so they back down. Well, their business is fine, But the problem is, when you're 50 years old and if you have a heart attack or if your health declines, you have this money that you can't use. You can't go do much. You can't spend much time with you can't do much with your kids because you're not physically capable. Your quality of life and your family's quality of life goes downhill because you were disciplined in one area, not in everything. And, I run into kids sometimes who grow up and their parents are very wealthy and they have a lot of opportunity, which is good for them. If they don't get into a sport or get into training or get into something that's controlled adversity, like they don't have adversity in life, but adversity in life is going to show up no matter whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You maybe don't have adversity financially. Well, you could have adversity in health, or someone tries to rob you, or, like there's a lot of things that can happen that can create adversity. If your first experience is something when your life's on the line, good luck with that one. What you want is to have that controlled adversity in yourself in your weekly, so that you're good at that adversity, and that's what hardens you. So that individual who does well financially, has a good family, has a nice home. If they don't do something for the physical end of it, if they don't do something for adversity, it's coming. It doesn't matter, it'll always show up. So you have a choice. Do you want to be ready for it or not? And that's what I love about training. That's what I love about sport, is that controlled adversity. It gives everybody, whatever your financial status is, whatever your personal life is, it gives everybody an opportunity to level up and harden themselves and be capable for whatever's coming their way. And, right now we live in a world where you have so many people I have anxiety issues, I have this, I have that. It's like, try eating really clean, sleep 8 hours, and bust your ass in the gym. Okay? Do those with a well-laid out program. And put yourself around people who are successful, who make good decisions consistently. Put yourself around people who are disciplined, who are trying to always constantly improve and evolve mentally and physically. And tell me at the end of that, a year or two later, tell me if your anxiety levels are the same. Because I guarantee it's not. I guarantee it's either going to be substantially lower or potentially even gone, depending on the individual and what they've accomplished in those couple of years.
I also have found that the gym environment is that chance to try to be different. Like definitely being younger. I did Wildland Fire through my 20s. We opened the gym I was like late in my 20s. And when I left there, I remember thinking consciously that like I was pretty strong-willed, strong-headed, pretty unwilling to compromise or find middle ground, pretty direct and upfront with people on my opinions of pretty much anything. And when we opened the gym, I felt like that was an opportunity for me to be better and lead better. And with that, maybe I can't do it 7 days a week all the time, but if I can maybe just do it for the classes that I coach. And then I feel like that same applies to the gym as an athlete. I mean, if you're in the gym and you attend 5 hours a week of CrossFit, because if you're like, man, I really struggle like interacting with people, or I don't like to work with others, or any of those like just personality pieces that you would like to improve at. I mean, it's a really specific and small amount of time where you could think to yourself, and I've talked this through with some athletes, where when you put your hand on the door of the gym and you go to step into that environment, make the switch. And if you can just maintain the person that you want to be for 1 hour, is that will start to trickle over and you'll become more of that on your own time. If you can maintain that 5 times a week for an hour, then you're going to see like it's a little easier and a little easier and a little easier to maintain who that person is. And that becomes who you are, because I really feel like it's more than capable of people being able to make change and have stuff that they like were really bad. I was thinking look back at myself 20 years ago, I'm pretty happy with how far I've traveled for personal development. I'm still a ways to go before I'm an Adam Neiffer positive guy. But I've closed that gap from where I was 20 years ago.
As you said, if I look at the greatest, the best gyms that I see, and this is CrossFit in and out, like it starts with, leadership. And for those that are trainers, you are leaders. And there's that saying, like, heavy is the crown. Like, you've got to like lead by example. And I know for me, I've learned that, a very hard way, but to your point, Jesse, like, yeah, I feel like I've, made significant strides, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I've been able to surround myself with specific individuals like the Chontoshes and Chris Smiths and the, all the other amazing, people that I've met through the CrossFit community, that a lot of them seem to come from that military background where, discipline was instilled very early on in their lives. And I was a ball sport guy, right? So I just played sports, and there's just certainly some discipline to that, but the discipline of, losing a game versus losing your life, or losing a teammate's life, are two completely different, realities. So to watch what those, individuals do, and I think that all of them would tell you that it's trainable. Becoming more disciplined is a trainable skill. And the way you do it is just like anything else. You get higher quality repetitions of doing it. Like getting into the gym when you don't want to do it, like getting up early, like when you want to hit the snooze on your alarm. Like those are all things that's like, one small step. Like you do that one day, you win that one little battle that day, and then you win the one little battle the next day, then one little battle the following day. Like those are all things that, like, if you don't feel like you're there, and a lot of times when we see people like Chris Smith or Chantosh, it's like, I don't have any illusion in my life that I'm going to row across the Atlantic. No, zero desire, zero skill. Like even if I wanted to, I don't have the ability, I think, to do that. But those people started off with that discipline very early in their life, where they were able to, strive and achieve that. And those people will tell you that your ability to become more disciplined is a trainable skill. And I would say that they would tell you they're stronger now than they were probably 20 years ago mentally as well, because they've learned a lot of things along the way. So as trainers, like, we need to first, live the life and live the example, be the example. And that's hard. Like the crown is heavy at times. And then the second is how do you celebrate your, your athletes and your members, like when they do something that's difficult, and making sure that they get acknowledgement for that, and they're getting that, positive reinforcement. Like, hey, like, you continue to do that throughout this year. Next year, I promise you're going to be stronger. And when you start doing those things, I mean, that's where we're really making significant change in people's lives, not just athletes, but, the, everyday person that just wants to lose 100 pounds. Like, it takes a lot of discipline to have the lifestyle to gain, to be 100 pounds overweight, and then to completely switch that lifestyle. And then in a year or two, like, now you're off diabetes medications, and now you're 100 pounds, you've lost 100 pounds. Like, that doesn't happen on accident. That takes a lot of discipline and dedication. And, we want to use those people as examples.
Understanding then, if discipline is a prime driver for working towards or achieving the goals that you want, then what would you say are elements that you can put in place that have a positive effect on that, or can help along that process? So, I mean, discipline feels like, okay, like I need to hold myself more accountable. I need to, if I say I'm going to do something, then, you need to, I always think about one thing we've got right now these days is class sign-in. Like, you see, you look at a Saturday morning, and we've got 3 CrossFit classes in the morning, and Friday about this time, it was like 2:20 on a Friday afternoon. I'm going to look, and it's going to show me 10, 10, 10 and wait lists. By the time we get to those classes tomorrow, we're going to be, 7, 8, and 9. And you're like, I mean, some people's plans change, but also sometimes I think it's a matter of, I want to go, and then the alarm goes off, and you're like, but I'd rather stay in bed a little bit more. And you're like, and I think that sort of piece is like those things that, like, those are decisions you have to make as an individual and accept. You're like, I need to try harder. But I also think there's things that you can put in place that help make that easier and less of a lonely path.
Well, I can tell you, like, something that I just recently did, and this is very minute. It's nothing big. It's not like I'm, saying I did anything amazing. But, I spent a long time working until the middle of the night. Like, a lot of times I'd get out, wouldn't get done with my day till like 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay. So, 9:30 was early to me. And so for a long time I was taking clients from 7 o'clock, and I would train people to 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And I would I'd work out at lunchtime. Well, how many vendors come in and want to sell you something? People want to come in and sign up. People have questions, and it just kept screwing my workout. And, even if I got the workout in, it just wasn't the intensity, or it would break it up, which made it hard for me to have the intensity that I wanted to have. So, recently I just said, screw it. I'm, heading to work at 5 o'clock in the morning. and I'm getting my workout in every day before, I haven't missed a workout. I haven't had a workout that in my mind was bad. I mean, some's been better than others, but all of them have been better than what they were before. You know, and it's just something simple as there wasn't much discipline to it. So it's like, well, I have to do this. This is just no choice. This is the only way I can guarantee I get a workout in before there's an opportunity to mess it up. Whether it's something happens with the business that kind of irritates me and gets me out of the mental zone, or it's something that just comes up that I literally end up not able to make the workout. So I just got up early and went in, and that is the most minute variation of a discipline, you know, but it is one step, and it was one step that has guaranteed that I've gotten every workout in since I've done that, you know. And then that feels like an accomplishment. So it's like, okay, well, cool. I'm in better shape. I'm stronger than I was. I'm leaner, fitter, better endurance. Okay, so now what am I going to do with that? You know, while I like to mountain bike, it's like, okay, well, I'm in better shape, so I have to hit harder stuff, higher pace, go farther. You know, like, you know, you start looking at all these things, and it's like it just takes one improvement in discipline that opens a door to somewhere else where you're like, okay, now I'm capable of this. Or, you know, maybe it's like, maybe if I live by Jesse, I'm like, man, he's grown up around mountain bikes in this area, and this is where like people are serious about mountain biking. So maybe I've always wanted to go mountain biking, but man, I don't know. Well, then if I'm not missing workouts anymore and I'm hitting all my workouts and I'm in much better shape, and mentally I'm tougher, physically I'm better. Now it's like, all right, I'm in better shape. If I'm going to do this anytime, now's the time to do this. Now I'm going to go get a ride with Jesse. Well, if I go out there and we have a blast, now I start mountain biking, I'm going to be even better shape than I was, you know? So you start hiding from less and less, because ultimately, what is it? Mm-hmm. What is lack of discipline? Lack of discipline means you're going to hide. You're going to hide from your evolution. You're going to hide from things that scare you, or things you're worried that you're not good enough for, or what are people going to think of the way you execute what you're doing? Like, I'm not really good at that. Does it really matter? Don't compare yourself to anybody else. Execute at your highest level. If you don't like the level it's at, do something about it. And that's where the discipline comes in. Start changing what you do, make choices. It just takes one, and then that will open a door to another one, and just keep making the correct choices, and you'll eventually walk through enough doors where you'll become something that's even better than what you hoped you would become.
I like that one, because I would put that down as rules. Mm-hmm. So as a contributing factor to improving sort of adherence and discipline is mm-hmm. have rules. Mm-hmm. So with you saying like, I'm just going to get up and do the workout every day first thing, is like, I can, that resonates for me for sure, because I do the same thing with mm-hmm. PM. So if I work out first thing in the morning, I find I'm too mm-hmm. like crushed to be of the highest value to other people. So mm-hmm. I prioritize like everyone else, but then at the end of the day, I train, and I will book almost nothing ever, with the mm-hmm. rarest of exceptions, past 6:15 p.m. Mm-hmm. So I will do all the work and all the things. And I mean, right now I'm working 70 to 80 hours a week, kind of week in, week out. Training is much harder to make happen, but I'm making it happen. And at mm-hmm. 6:15, my work is done, and I switch gears no matter how tired I am, no matter everything else, because the rule is at 6:15 you train. Mm-hmm. And that's been a huge piece for me. Like, I found that an 80-hour work week is spicy, but tolerable and actually quite sustainable if I can still get my training in. But mm-hmm. as soon as I start missing my training, I mean, 1 week, okay, 2 weeks, you're like, it's a problem. And by 3 weeks in, I'm like, what, you start to be like, what am I doing with my life? Mm-hmm. But if I still work the same amount of hours and then add 8 to 10 hours of training on top of that, I actually am doing better overall with even mental health and how I look at my sort of like choices I make in life.
You know, it's like your choices, they bleed into everything. Like, if you're not disciplined, you know, all those undisciplined choices start to bleed into other areas and make everything else go downhill. They make your relationship go downhill. Not hard to think, if you're lazy with yourself, you're going to be lazy in a relationship. You know, if your relationships aren't going good and you can't make it to gym, you can't train, you can't eat well, your sleep's erratic, trust me, the relationship problem's probably you. Okay. So, you know, the one thing I always try to do is I always want to look at myself first. But the more choices I make that are correct, it bleeds into everything else as well, you know? So, you know, it's just one of those things that people don't take this serious enough. But, you know, the things Jesse's talking about, he can have discipline because he starts making the choices. But I noticed for me, when I'm programming for athletes, programming's always way better, way cooler if I'm training hard. If my training's not going good,
absolutely.
I'm not as innovative, and I can tell the quality's not as good.
100% agree.
I'm innovative when I'm training. The workouts get harder too. Like literally, I had a guy that he had moved away, but he's driving up from a couple states over every Saturday to come train. And he walks in, and I send him some programming. He's like, "Man, I can tell you're training good again." He's like, "Training's gotten spicy," like so. And even I didn't have to say anything to him. He knew. So it's like, even though you try your hardest at your job, if you're not centered in where you need to be, you're never going to be as good a version of you as that you can be. And you might say, "Yeah, I missed a workout. That's on me. It doesn't hurt anybody else." You're full of it. It does hurt everybody else. You're less likely to get up and play with your kid, or maybe you play with your kid for 30 minutes when you could have played for an hour and a half. Maybe, there's something you could have done with your wife and you have a better relationship because of that. Or you're more innovative because you're happier and because you're trying stuff and you're like, "Oh, I need to work this area and I don't really feel it's getting worked real well. I feel like this is where I'm lacking." And then you're innovative and you find a way to get past that. It's like, "Oh, well, what other athletes do I have that might be lacking that could need that? Well, now I have something to fix that with." That doesn't happen without the discipline,
There's I think it was in Chinese weightlifting, the white book from Ma Strength.
Yeah.
Where in one of the pages in the intro, I think they're talking about the history of like weightlifting in China, and that lifting weights or lifting things came to China through like the church or like YMCA or something like that. And the premise was that the sell to train and take care of your body was you are of higher service to your friends, family, community, and religion by being strong and capable and not having enough. Like, you need to be healthy for you to be of value to others around you. And that was the initial sort of like what the agenda that was pushed for like self-care, training, etc. I just thought I don't know exactly how that story goes, and I'm probably butchering it, but to me, I was like, I mean, I definitely think that's true. I mean, I could have less time and accomplish more if I'm training harder than if I have more time and not training.
It's interesting because it's like with the world the way it is today, it's like that should be the number one public service announcement worldwide, right? It's like people act like, it's okay because everybody else is getting mentally weaker, physically weaker. No, it's not okay. And everybody can do better. But how do you say you're a good person if you're not bringing as much capability as you can to the table? You can sit there and say, "Well, I want to help my parents all I want," but if my parents aren't physically able to do something and I have to, pick them up and get them in bed, or if I have to get food for them, if I have to do work around the house for them or whatever, if I'm not physically capable of it, my parents are going to suffer. If I have a kid with special needs and I'm not physically capable, my kid's, care is going to suffer. Their quality of life is going to be less. They're not going to be as comfortable. I'm not okay with that. Okay. To me, I want to have the discipline to be able to give, if I had a kid with special needs or my parents were sickly, to give them the best care possible. I want to return the favor to my parents they gave to me. I want to give my kids, the most I can give them. And, there's something that it went around. There's a meme that went around, but I absolutely love it. And it is like, you talk to these people and you talk to a mom or a dad and they're like, "I'd put my life on the line for my kid. I'd step in front of a lion, a bear. I would do this. I would do that. I would fight to the death for them." It's like, but would you eat good for them? Would you work out for them? Yeah.
No, skip it.
You might step in front of a bullet for your kid, but how many people have to put their life on the line to save their kid versus how many people can change the quality of life of their kid just by eating healthy and working out regularly, right? Kids, you can say all you want to your kid. You know what the number one thing is? They watch. They learn by example. You can say it to them for 10 years straight. And if you don't do one time what you told them to do for 10 years, guess who's not going to do anything that you told them to do? Your kid. But if you live by example, they're going to listen to that example. Now you have a child who's more physically capable, more mentally capable, and if you want to talk about saving their life or giving them a good quality of life, who's to say you're there on that day they need to have their life saved? And you might not be there. Did you make them strong enough, physically, mentally capable, to handle the situation? Better off to have them capable of handling situations so you don't have to be there. It's a bonus if you get to be there and make life a little bit easier for them that day and take care of it for them. But, there's no guarantee that you're going to be there on that day. And I know that a lot of these parents say that they'd give their life for the kid, and I 100% believe them. But the situations that you're talking about are very, very rare. It doesn't happen often. Not saying you shouldn't train for them, because I believe you should. But I'm saying that 99% more likely it's going to happen is that you get diabetes and you die earlier. You get heart disease and you die earlier. That you get dementia, Alzheimer's earlier, and it becomes worse, and your kids have to their quality of life lowers because they're spending more time working with you and helping you out, and they can't evolve or do other things that could potentially do for themselves or their family. So, well, some things we can't stop. What we can do is have discipline, and that discipline leads us to these physical and mental capabilities that allow us to do more and go farther in life. And it's 100% living by example. So if you're not disciplined, don't be surprised if your kids aren't disciplined. Okay. And again, if you're not, it's okay, man. That's why you're watching this podcast right now, because we're telling you why you need to become disciplined. And we also told you it's easy. The next choice you have to make, just make the correct one. Doesn't matter what you did before. Don't worry about it. Don't look back. I love that saying where it's like, if you look in the past, you get depressed. If you look in the future, you get anxious. Like, live in the moment. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with your mental toughness. If you made mistakes in the past, don't sit there and dwell on it, because that's what you're going to believe you are. Evolve. Don't look in the future and say, well, am I going to be capable of this? How the heck do you know? Start with your day one. Nail day one down. Then after you nail day one, you're going to have the momentum behind it to make it easier to nail day two down, and just keep on going and don't look back.
Yeah, you can juxtapose that entire anecdote right there to your clients being your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody follows a, do what I say, not what I do, leadership style. Like, it's just non-existent, especially
Mm-hmm.
in the fitness industry. But yeah, I mean, your kids are watching what you do far more than listening to what you say. And it's the same,
Mm-hmm.
the same route with the clients. And I think one of the
Mm-hmm.
things, if we think about some of the practical application of this, like, how do we train it? And you guys both alluded to it, was, and I similarly, Shane last year had to, start training at 5:30 a.m. Like that, just set up a class, got some guys that come over to here in the other side of the gym here. And we just met 5:30 a.m. just because once my day got started and, training all my clients, kids, we're all busy. It's like, it's the only time I could get in. So you got to find times to get it in. But you set a plan, what's your plan going to be, and make it realistic. What's realistic for where you're at right now. Is that 3 times a week? Is it 4 times a week? Is it 5 times a week? We're not trying to, James Clear does a great job explaining this in Atomic Habits of, if you set an ice cube in a room and the thermostat set at 28, the changing of temperature from 28 to 29 isn't any more, or is just as important as the temperature changing from 32 to 33 degrees. Even though it starts melting at 33, it still had to go from 28 to 29 to make a difference. And everything you're trying to do is create the identity of who you want to be. And your actions, like you said, Shane, your actions define who you are. Like, if you're a musician, it means you play music daily for 30 to 60 minutes. If you're healthy, it means you eat healthy foods, you sleep well, it means you get into the gym. Anything you think of, like, if you're a business professional, like, what do you do on a daily basis? Like, you're doing business deals, you're in meetings, like, your actions define who you are, and that is your identity. And I think that's one of the great takeaways of that book of Atomic Habits is try to become the person you want to be by making those actions. And it needs to start small, and you just make small steps on top of that. Like, don't try to get it all. Like, this is where too many people, especially CrossFit, is like, everybody wants to be Rich Froning, in 3 months. It's like, that's not how this works. Like, you'll be lucky, you're not going to be him, chances are, but those things take years and years to develop. And it doesn't mean it can't be achieved. It just means you have to be realistic with where you're at and just be a little bit better than you were last week. And that a little bit better, just like that 5-pound PR you talked about, it's the same thing with your actions. It's not any different. And it's one of the things that I think the longer I've done this, I think it's it's arguably behavior modification is the most critical component of being able to have the greatest impact, because if you can't get somebody to execute the plan that you have in place for them, I don't care how great of a coach you are, they're not going to see the results because they're not doing what they need to do. So how do you keep somebody, online, in check? That's a really hard line because, just like you said, I hate talking about it sometimes, Shane, where you talked about your world record holder, where it's like, man, when is the fine line of, like, when do you, like, want them to back off? Like, hey, I need you to back off. Because I'd say the reality of the situation is, like, in the affiliate, that's not most people. It's a pretty small percentage. But it is times where it's like, hey, you need to calm down.
Yeah.
And maybe think about something different. Like let's move into nutrition. Like, that's another, important aspect of, from a mental and a discipline. If you have a good coach that's training you right, it's like you can't out train your lifestyle and your diet. So as trainers and coaches, like how do we make people better outside of the gym? And obviously I think that again, it starts with, doing it ourselves, but we also creating plans for people, holding people accountable. And that's a lot harder. Doing our job inside the gym, I feel like one of the easiest parts.
Oh, no, 100%. You first have to get to an athlete or an individual who won't quit before you can teach them when to stop. Okay. So like, it's like you take that Navy SEAL who they go through buds and it's like, okay, what do we prove? We prove they won't quit. Cool. They won't quit. So now we have someone we can work with, right? Now is the time to educate them on when it's okay to stop. Stopping is not quitting. But until you know that you're not a quitter and you can't quit and there's nothing that'll happen that'll make you quit, then you don't know if you're quitting or stopping, right? But once you know that you're not a quitter, and once you've done that through every day making good decisions over an extended period of time, now you take the knowledge base you gain from your coach, and your coach says, hey, X, Y, and Z happens, you have to stop. Then you go, okay, these things happen, it's okay for me to stop. But if you quit in the past, you can't stop. And that's where I said, like, that you first have to have an athlete who wants to go, right? That doesn't mean they're mentally strong yet. It means that they are either disciplined enough or mentally strong enough to go and want to win. It's the person who's done it long enough who then can listen to when to stop. But until they've solidified that they're not a quitter, they can't stop, because then they have to worry that they're a quitter, right? And that person who's a go person, they're usually scared to death of quitting and being a quitter, and they're hoping they're that person who will never stop. But until you face enough adversity, you don't know if you're that person who will stop or not. Once you face it enough, then you can be confident in who you are, and then you know when you can stop instead of quitting, right? And I want to just kind of say something. I was on a conversation yesterday with an individual. He owns a gym, and I've been doing his programming for a long time, and he's competed in CrossFit, he's competed in powerlifting, kind of done quite a few different things. And he's having good success out of his gym, but for a while he was getting burnt out. I was like, my training's not going good, this and that. I'm like, okay, number one, let's have, he's like, what do I need to do to my training? I'm like, it's not your training. What you need to do is learn how to be happy. Get more efficient in your business, run your business more efficiently, get more efficient with your personal life to where you have more time, with your wife, more time doing, things that you like to do. And you need some time set aside each week, month to explore and learn new things and try new things. And I was like, so give yourself a better quality of life, and make sure you're sleeping good, make sure you're more positive, work on these things. And I was like, don't even worry about the training will take off. He's been worrying about those things. Business is getting better. He's had more opportunities than he's ever had in business. His training's going better than it ever has. And it had nothing to do with training that I talked to him about. I'm like, it had everything to do with his personal life and how to structure that to optimize his personal life. And so I like to ask questions, because that lets me know what type of help someone needs. And he had been in front of Louis Simmons before. He had went out to Westside. He's been in my gym. He's been around, a lot of top lifters. And I asked him, I said, what do you think the quality about Louis was that was the most important and impressive to me? Like, what do you think I admired the most about Lou? He's like, wow, that's a tough one. Because Lou has developed so much in the world of strength training. His intelligence is something that people could easily say, oh, he's extremely intelligent. And I said, the number one thing about him was he'll never quit. I was like, because you have to understand that the education that Louis had, the knowledge and the things that he developed all started with never quitting. It was every single time he ran into a problem, he wouldn't quit. So he had to develop a solution, which means he had to educate himself. He had to surround himself with better coaches, better athletes, better people. He had to get better books. And there's books that Louis would talk about that he would read 200 to 300 times. I want to ask you, like, a book that's important to you, how many times have you read it? So if you're at home and you're like, man, I found this like strength training book that was awesome, this book about mindset that was awesome. Great. How many times did you read it? Because when you read it the first time, what you're going to get out of it is what you need. A year later, you should be a different individual than you were at the time you read it the first time. So different things are going to pop out at you. There are things that could be in that book that you aren't capable of understanding right now or utilizing. But as we gain experience and surround ourselves with other people who are capable of things that we're not, we will gain that experience, that exposure, And then those things start to pop out at us and become extremely important. That's why for me, I read the Book of Rings every year every year. And so like I've been doing that for probably, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years now, right? Because something different pops out every single time. But it was Lou's discipline where he never missed workouts and he always executed the highest of his ability. That discipline led to a guy that built a never quit and a truly, a very rare individual who truly would never quit. And then since he would never quit, he had choices to make. He developed the reverse hyper because he broke his back in 9 places. He had an option: invent something to fix himself or quit. He could have stayed training block periodization, but he was too beat up from it. So he's like, I'm not going to quit, so I have to do something differently. That is why you guys are listening to our podcast, is because he wouldn't quit. Okay? It was his discipline is why you're listening to us. We wouldn't be here right now if he was a quitter. Okay? So since he wasn't, his education went through the roof. And then I remember we were talking to Lou, and at one point he's like, people talk about once he hit 40, 50 years old, there's some people say 40, some people say 45, some people say 50. They say at some point you have to start doing 10% more volume a year just to maintain where you're at. So Louis like, so I started doing 15% more a year every year, from 50 to 70. Why? Because he didn't want to maintain. To the last time in the gym, he was trying to evolve before he passed away, and that all started with not quitting and consistently making those disciplined choices led to a point where he couldn't quit if he wanted to. Okay. What do you do a WOD for? Like I look at a WOD and I look at, say, Fran. I'm just gonna use an example just because everybody knows the workout. I don't do Fran because I wouldn't do Fran necessarily because that is what's going to make me the best shape person in the world. Is it a good workout? Of course it's a good workout. Fran is a tester. So for me, if I'm training CrossFit athletes, or if I work with someone in the gym who's never going to compete, but they're doing CrossFit, that's a tester. So that shows me how well laid out their training protocol is. It shows me if I'm building that athlete to be mentally tougher. Because what if they're physically more capable, they do Fran and they don't run a faster time? But I know they're physically more capable. Now I know they don't like the discomfort. They're not mentally capable. Now the mental games I have to work on, right? So no matter what, and then let's say I do Fran and they're mentally tough and their Fran time doesn't improve. Well, then if that was our goal, is to improve our Fran time, now we have to look at the training that we did because something in the training wasn't laid out properly. So I have, like, when I look at bench press, or if you go to a powerlifting meet, the powerlifting meet's a tester. That's to show you how well laid out your training protocol was leading up to that. If you don't do well at the meet, well, then your training protocol wasn't laid out well. And that might be because there was something lacking in the actual physical component, or that might be because while the physical components might have all lined up, you might not have had something to develop your mental game. And so then, therefore, your mental game didn't develop. And maybe the numbers you were looking at scared you, and you put too much pressure on yourself because now's the first time you have a chance of a pro total or a world record or a state championship, right? And now there's some ramifications of your actions where when you were a new lifter, nobody knew you, nobody cares what you lift, everybody just cheers you on and they're happy for you if you do well. But you're not a threat to anybody, so there's no pressure on you, right? All these things start to add up. Life is a test, okay? How well do you do when that test comes up in front of you? And discipline is going to be the deciding factor. So while Louis was an obscenely intelligent individual and there's not enough lifetimes to learn from the guy as far as the world of strength training goes, the reason why he knew so much is because he put so much time into studying and trying to fix problems that his discipline level gave him more time in fixing problems than anybody else. And that's really what it came down to.
So what are some ways, obviously we're talking about big picture things. We talked about some discipline, but some other psychology of injuries. How do you guys work with, because that's obviously a mental, I think, major setback where you can see a lot of people that's where they really fall off, or like even COVID, for example, right? Like how many people, fell off because of COVID, and not necessarily an injury, but same thing, a disruption to the process that was, people were succeeding with. Injuries can do that as well. What are some ways you guys attack that with your athletes and members?
Being in Squamish, we get quite a few injuries. Not necessarily, to be clear, not gym related injuries, but we're in a location that's got a pretty high level outdoor community with people definitely pushing sort of that level up, and that level is like world class for a whole bunch of things. And because of that, you can have someone leave the gym on Friday afternoon and show up Monday with a cast or just having had surgery. One of the guys just fractured his clavicle like a week or two ago and shoved it like through his trap and had surgery for that. So he just was back in the gym like yesterday or the day before for his first day back. But I mean, injuries is a crazy special one with Conjugate. And that is such a huge deal. Is like injuries. One, I think you're dealing with people who are forced into testing adversity and that opportunity to have that pressure put on you for when things aren't perfect or exactly the way you want it. So you're injured, whatever that injury might be. What does that look like for your training? I mean, I think I've told the story before. It was like a couple years ago. I like stabbed half of the side of my finger off on like Sunday night. I broke a blade cutting rubber flooring and like put it like across one of my fingers and like wrapped it and got to the hospital. It was like 13 stitches and texted Shane like Monday night. I was like, oh man, I got 13 stitches in my one finger. That whole hand is like a bit of bad shape right now. And he was like, did you miss any training? And I was like, thank fuck. I can answer this question the way that I want to answer it. And I mean, like, it's because of Conjugate. The answer was no, that I didn't miss train. I didn't miss max effort Monday. I used a safety squat and I could keep one hand on the bar. I've got a video on my Instagram of like, I mean, me hitting a PR on my safety squat with one hand holding onto the bar, the other hand just kind of floating at that elevation. You can see the one finger is like fully wrapped up because it's got 13 stitches that I got the day before. And so, and definitely as well, I would say with my Achilles was the best test of that, is where my Achilles was the first one where I had more substantial and valuable knowledge about how to deal with things. And so when I ruptured my Achilles competing for strongman, I had surgery a week after, and I think I had like 2 or 3 days out of the gym where, I mean, I was standing up and kind of like blacking out and stuff like that. Like I needed a couple of days to like just let it settle out, because as soon as I stood up and like put pressure, even like just elevating the rest of my body over that injury site was enough that it was like pretty hard. But after day 3, I was back down the gym. And I think there's a bunch of factors that have a huge impact on injury. Is one, for us, you don't train less. So if before your injury you trained 8 to 10 hours a week, you need to be in the gym 8 to 10 hours a week through your injury. And if that means that all you can do is come in and roll and do some mobility and stretching, then that's what you do. But you don't train the number of hours that you spend. You don't change the number of hours that you spend in the gym. 2 is that you really start to value and learn what it's like to have a gym that's got community versus everyone just lifting in headphones. Is that the difference is, I mean, when I went in there, so after my Achilles, I was like, well, I can be in there. And I borrowed a wheelchair. And so I was coaching just in a wheelchair. Not to be dramatic about it, but it just made it so I could like be in there coaching for like, 5 or 6 hours at a time. And then training, I mean, it just was faster. I mean, it's just a million times faster zipping around from one place to the other. And then you just be like, hey, do you mind like putting the 45s on the bench for me? Or do you mind like putting some plates away from me? And in a good community where you have great training partners, I mean, you barely break a stride. Like for me with my Achilles, I was like, well, I mean, I draped that leg over a box so that I couldn't apply any pressure to that foot. So I was in an air cast and I draped the one leg over a box, and I didn't miss like 3 of the days a week. I was able to do dynamic upper or max effort upper and my upper accessory day. And so I had easy 3 days a week of training before I even had to think a little bit like about what I would need to like modify or change. And I think that's where the Conjugate system stands really strong. So some of that, I think, with injury is, one, having a system that very quickly, like in the moment, can adapt to the athlete's needs, where it's not like, oh, you can't back squat. Oh, well, I guess you're out. come back when you're healthy again. So having a system that allows the athlete to not break a stride. I mean, we have tons of CrossFitters that show up and, you know, have like, oh, I can't support a bar like in the front rack. All right, great. Good. Grab the safety squat. And we can use that for the next couple of weeks. Or, I mean, I just need to control pregnancy. Just need to control the bottom position on my squat. Sweet. Now we're switching to box squat. And you box squat wall ball, and you box squat thrusters, and you box squat, and you can adjust the height of that box to accommodate them. So I think if the athlete's got an open mind and is willing to look at it as an adversity with an opportunity to learn and develop other pieces through that period of time, then you can make huge gains. I mean, we've had a ton of moms who have used that pregnancy time as opportunity to put time and effort into things they otherwise probably wouldn't when they can do all of the training things they can do. And it's awesome. It's awesome to see, because some of those people come back and getting back into regular training in a couple months hit all-time bests. Because instead of it becoming something that was like oppressing their training regime, it became an opportunity to learn new things, think about things differently. You know, I've had people, we've got gym copies of all kinds of books that I'll just lend out. So if you are reducing your training time, okay, like then read for 2 hours instead of coming to the gym. Read 2 hours of book of methods and until you get through that. And then let me know when you've got questions, because there's so much opportunity with injuries to continue to develop in just an avenue that again, if you could step back and look at the bigger picture, can have such a positive change on what you're capable of, where you get to. I mean, I've had lots of setbacks athletically. I mean, the reality is, one, I'm just not that good. And two, I will definitely push things past where my body can handle. And there's been a lot of lessons there, and a lot of like frustrating pieces and disappointments. But inside of there, I've never let it get to like, oh, my life is sad. I've always been able to like look at it and be like, okay, like what can I do? You know, what can I learn? Like, how can I continue to, push the ball down the field in a way that's productive? And I can like attest to, getting a text from Shane, be like, well, what did you do about it? And not be like, I stayed at home on my couch. Life is hard, and just being able to be like, I still went and I just modified things, And we had one girl, I think the most complicated case that I've ever had was she was born with like one leg like 3 inches shorter than the other. And by the time she came in the gym, she was like early 20s and was like 75 surgeries over 20 years into where she was at, and was at a stage where she was now moving towards them amputating the lower part of her one leg, because it was just too much. One foot she walked on like the very ball of the foot, the other foot walked flat. Super complicated, but amazing person. Like such a great attitude, such good motivation, like just really always friendly, great laugh. And there's a couple things that really came out of it that were awesome. And one of them was we could do upper body, and she was totally normal. And so the first time in her life, she got to train unimpeded by something she's dealt with her entire life, and was really great at benching. And it was very cool. And then secondary to that was, I mean, it pushed my knowledge and limits substantially for being able to come up with modifications for that. But we did. And we found out ways to modify to fake lever lengths. So on her one foot, she wore there was a Canadian brand called Canema. There was like a really high heeled lifting shoe, like old school wood heel, but higher than like pretty much all the rest. So she would wear that on one foot and a Chuck Taylor on the other. And that actually started to even out her torso and upper body. And then we could make little changes where we actually, like, she was able to box squat with modifications. And over months, like we made a ton of progress and gains through things that everywhere else she'd gone into, they just turned her away because it's too complicated and too high risk. And I mean, those sort of pieces. And I feel because of that, when people are like, well, I've just got an injury, I don't know if I can train. I mean, I always think that in the back of my head, be like, well, let me tell you a little story.
Yeah. Jesse, I'm glad I'm glad you brought that up, because it's always been some of the most enjoyable times in a coaching career for me is when you have someone with special needs who you help them um, work through issues that they have, and show them there's things they can do that they didn't think they could. Because a lot of times those athletes have an awesome mental state to where you got to keep your mouth shut. You can't complain about anything around them.
Totally.
But this is a good thing. What I tell you is, this is kind of a good teaching moment, I think, for people out there listening to this podcast right now. I was teaching a seminar, and there's a girl in the seminar who's in a wheelchair, and she competed in bench press. I ended up later on working with her, which was an awesome experience. But at the seminar, we're doing stuff, and we're getting to this thing where we're going to go outside and do sled dragging. So I walk over, and I'm like, okay. And she's sitting inside. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, well, can't sled drag. I'm like, yeah, get outside, you're sled dragging. So, we go outside and hook a sled up to a wheelchair. Unfortunately, my engineering skills were at a low that day, and I hooked it to the back. So she goes right into a wheelie. That wasn't going to work. So I unhooked the strap and I hooked it all the way to the front. So it pulled down on the front, and then she could pull. The looks I got from the other women that were there that day, they were not too happy with me that I had this girl out there and I'm going to have her sled drag. And they're like, I cannot believe you're doing that to her. Literally, were saying this to me. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, you're going to have her, like, she can't sled drag. I'm like, I was like, you think I'm being rude or mean by making her do something that you don't think she can do. I said, I think I'm giving her everything she wants, that she can do everything that everybody else can do. And I was like, sled work for her is no different. It's hitting her shoulders, it's hitting her triceps. I said, it's great recovery. She's getting a ton of blood flow in there. She gets to get outside and do something. She gets to, go sled drag. If she has a friend who's sled dragging, who's an able body who doesn't need a wheelchair, and that's exactly what it did for her. But, if we don't run into those people, we don't get those challenges, and when you work with people like that, you start to really realize how far the body can be pushed. And this sounds really kind of stupid saying, but it's like, for how fragile a human body is, and I've seen some very fragile things happen to people, we're extremely resilient too if our mind's in the right place. And this is a very minor thing. I'm not going to talk about any like big things that's happened to me, but I'll talk about something that's very minor, but it was a very good learning experience. When I first went to Westside Barbell, I had extremely bad tendonitis in my arms, and I was benching, and I'd rack the bar and I'd peel my fingers off the bar, and my whole arms would just be aching, throbbing real bad. And I'd been to a doctor. Doctor's like, it's going to be about a year and a half, 2 years before you get rid of this tendonitis. Like, it's severe, it's bad. So Louis comes up to me, grabs my back of the arms, like, your arm's hurting real bad, huh? You got tendonitis real bad. I said, yeah. And he goes, okay, well, you need to train your triceps 7 days a week. Well, once a week was killing me and driving me absolutely nuts. I used to love to train triceps, but when my tendonitis was up, I hated it. Every rep was painful. So at first I'm like, this old man's crazy. I'm like, well, everybody says the old man's crazy, and this old man produces better than anybody else. So why am I here? I'm here for one reason, and one reason only, that's to learn. So I'm shutting my mouth and doing exactly what he says. So, I had 1 day a week I trained heavy. That was to try to keep my strength up. But the other 2 workouts, because I had to do it 3 times to 4 times a day, the other 2 workouts on my heavy day and the other 3 workouts a day, the other 6 days a week for my triceps, were all to high repetition. So I would do a completely different exercise, different angle, different grip. And I would do, like, say, 4 sets of 100, 200 reps on a tricep movement. And I would do that 3-4 times a day, 7 days a week. Every week, my tendonitis got better. About 3.5 months later, gone. Never had tendonitis since then. I used to get tendonitis, and it used to come back once every year and a half, and it would just be a bout of like 3, 4, 5 months of just pain to deal with, hold me back in my lifting. Never had it since. We call those finishers when we do sets of 100 or so at the end of a workout. That is when it is solidified in my mind. Finishers are a necessity, not a luxury, and that a workout is not finished until you do a finisher. Otherwise, you half-assed it, and you lack discipline. So in my gym, I've had my gym for 17 years. We've never had anybody who's had tendonitis. And I think that's huge, considering, I've had 127 world records broken out of the gym and never had anybody with tendonitis. Why? Because we do these finishers. And that was solidified in me at the beginning. And, when I had that, which I don't consider that an injury, that was just an irritation, it was a learning moment, though. And Lou and other guys at Westside Barbell all said the same thing to me, and because they want to instill this in you, because if you're going to be a part of Westside, then you have to have the thought processes instilled to do the same thing, so everybody in the gym's doing it. And everybody's like, oh man, injuries are bad. When you get an injury, man, it just means you have to work out harder and more frequently. It means your volume has to go up. You can't hit a massive bench, squat, deadlift. So then you're going to have to do a lot more reps and a lot more sets, man, because you got to get that volume in, and it's like every time you got injured, it was like, oh man, like one, you don't want to get injured, but two, you're like, oh, training's going to be rough for a while, and it was like, you just train harder, you didn't train as heavy, the intensity came down, but you pushed as hard as you can in rep schemes that kept you safe, and you did it more frequently to get blood flow in there more often. And then we start looking at it, it's like, okay, what do they say? Like, doctor says you can be back in 8 weeks. It's like, well, we know routinely that we can get back in half the time, no problem. Sometimes faster, but 100% every time we get back in half the time. So then if I get one injury every 2 years, I compete for 20 years, that's 10 injuries. If my injury takes me 4 weeks to overcome, my opponent takes them 8 weeks to overcome, over that 20-year time period, they have 40 more weeks of downtime than I had. So I've just evolved almost a year ahead of them, And so what happens is I get healthier in a shorter time period because, I'm good at it because I practiced, right? Every time you had an injury, every time a client had an injury or athlete had an injury, like, boom, that's solidified in my mind what I learned at Westside, and to constantly hit that area and do everything can to come back from it. But the great thing is when someone's worried about getting a 1,200-pound squat and they're 1,100-pound squatter, the only thing they care about is the 1,200-pound squat. You're like, hey, man, you need to do some hip mobility work. Yeah, I'll get to it. Well, if the work they're doing is making their numbers go up, they're never going to look at that mobility issue. They get hurt. Now it's like, well, what else are you going to do with your time, man? And now you start seeing they do mobility work and they do that. And Jesse's right. I can't tell you how many times I had someone come back and it's like immediately after coming back from an injury, boom, they hit the biggest PR of their life. Yeah. And it's like, oh, now you know why that mobility is important. You saw how much it improved your technique and how much more efficient you are. And now the juice is worth the squeeze, and they will not stop doing that mobility work because that was, implemented there. Don't look at your injuries as the end of something or a negative. Look at it as hey, your body's telling you needed a shift, an adjustment. You need other things you have to learn. You haven't been putting enough time in those areas learning them, so I forced you to learn them. It's just the same thing as how we do 3-week waves. If you don't do those waves, eventually you're going to lose 20, 25 pounds off your squat in 1 week. Not because you got 25 pounds weaker in the squat, because your nervous system said, hey, since you don't know what you're doing, I'm going to protect you from yourself. I'm going to degrade the nervous system, not allow you to lift as much weight. And so it's the same thing. Why did I get tendonitis? Clearly I wasn't well-rounded. I wasn't doing finishers. Maybe I had imbalances. Doesn't really matter. But I wasn't well-rounded. So my body gave me a message. Hey, man, you're not cutting it, dude. Like, there's something else you got to do, And so these are opportunities to fix something that you clearly made a mistake in. And that also includes if you got injured, like in a car accident. Yes, that might not be because you're training, but I guarantee you, if you read more, like Jesse said, or you put more effort in your mobility work, or you start to really figure out how to recover from this injury, you might also learn how to recover better from your normal training that allows you to train more intense or higher volume so you can have adaptations come more frequently.
Two things that I think about listening to that is, one, I agree. Like, I think that if you continue to put the time in through your injury cycle, that your return to regular training is substantially faster. Mm-hmm. So my Achilles repair was the fastest I was back to training. I think within 3 months, I was back to deadlifting over 500 and feeling good about it, and worked at a pace that I thought was appropriate and reasonable for where I was at. But it was my fastest recovery cycle relative to in my early mid-20s when I had my shoulder repaired, where it felt like it was years. It was years before it was reasonable again. So I think continuing to make it to the gym, put the time in, make that time count. So it's quality time. It's not cranking out the 10,000 hours so you can say you did your 10,000 hours and you must be good now. But that time has to be quality. And relative to the people who are like, hey, I got this wrist thing, it was bugging me, so I just took 3 or 4 weeks off. I'm back now. And first session, you're like, how does it feel? Exactly the same as it felt 3 or 4 weeks ago. And all you've accomplished is losing 3 or 4 weeks of training rather than coming in and modifying. The second piece that I thought about there with you saying that, taking Louis' advice, you're like, man, it feels bad to do this. This like feels like a crazy thing to have to say, is as an athlete, being able to get out of your own way, is being humble enough and keeping the ego in check enough that when you're interacting with a coach, I mean, it makes me feel better when you listen to Louis on some of those first West Side podcasts, being disgruntled or maybe a little like disheartened with like some of the athletes that he works with for just being like, they don't listen to him or they write him off as just like, the old man is crazy. Even Dave Tate talks about like the first year he spent training with Louis, how he's just like, man, like this old guy's crazy. I'm not doing anything he has to say. And then after a year was like, okay, I'm going to do exactly what he has to say just so I can prove that it doesn't work. And then he really took off.
Chris, I think out of the three of us, you have you've worked with more coaches and had to educate more coaches than Jesse and I through your education that you've delivered through CrossFit. The training that you've gone through and the amount of coaches that you've had in front of you is astronomical compared to most strength coaches out there in the world. When you talk about discipline, or we talk about discipline and mental space, what are some of the things that you've seen when you work with trying to build coaches that you see common mistakes that are easily fixable through either discipline or just through the right kind of mental state, as far as that goes, that you think would be a good thing to deliver to people today out there, people listening who may be newer coaches,
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, if we kind of shift gears and we're thinking about the discipline of the coach, what I would say is what I probably see the least amount of is just a real commitment to quality repetition in the coaching realm. So like we talk about like, training, you need to get quality repetitions to get good, right? It's not just doing the reps to do the reps. So we'll see, trainers inside the community that, they've learned a couple things, but they're really not challenging themselves to learn more. They're not going into the class with a written out lesson plan of like, here's like major things that I'm going to be focused on from a teaching standpoint. Here are going to be the major, faults that I'm probably going to be seeing. And like, here's some ways that I'm going to start to fix those faults. Cause the class dynamic brings a lot, makes it a lot tougher. It's a lot more difficult than one-on-ones. And, I was kind of fortunate to grow up as a one-on-one trainer before I was a class trainer. And I still think that a lot of trainers need more time just doing one-on-one to train their eyes better, to have more conversations with people, to be able to take their time with movement. When you're in a class, things are, you're spinning 15 different plates and you're trying to keep everything spinning. So like, your RAM gets bogged down really hard. So when you're trying to think clearly in an environment like that, if you're not doing all the little things behind the scenes of like really designing a good lesson plan, if you're not training your eye outside of the class, so like, your ability to see, that's one thing I thought that was awesome that you and Leanne crushed, and Jesse, same thing when we went to the Conjugate. It was really awesome to see just every single rep had coaching cues. And you just don't see that a lot. Right now I feel like there's a lot of Denise Thomas said this in a really good way at the West Coast Affiliate Summit of, we have a lot of good instructors, but not a lot of really good coaches. So people will give some instruction like, hey, I want you to do 5 hang power cleans and I want you to think about hip extension, go. And then like, it just kind of stops there. Okay, next thing I want you to do is we're going to do 5 front squats. I want you to think about pushing your hips back and down, go. But there's not really like this high level of like, I'm going to coach, I'm going to make your movement better. And like, that's where coaching takes it in, that's the seeing and this correcting. So I think the discipline from the coach then becomes, how much are you doing behind the scenes? And I think all of us will agree that the success that we see in any sports field or, military accolades, it happens behind the scenes when nobody else is looking. It expresses itself in that moment when all the training, what do they say? It's you fall to the level of training that you've done. You don't live up to the training. You fall down to the level of training that you're at. So if you're not putting in all those quality repetitions behind the scenes, and I think that sometimes, especially you get good athletes, they just tend to think that they're good at what they do and they're just not thinking about it from a coaching standpoint. But I would say just that commitment to refining your craft. Like, can you see really well? Can you correct really well? And that should never end. And I mean, I've seen this a lot now with CrossFit, and myself included. One of the reasons of just getting back into Fort Vancouver was, after, a year and a half of being outside of X Factor, I've been doing a lot of one-on-ones, training athletes, training competitors. But like, if you don't train people, that is a skill that will diminish. It is a diminishing skill. you are losing repetitions of learning how to see better, learning how to explain things better, looking at people biomechanically different. So if you're not getting those repetitions, I don't care. I mean, you can mentor people all you want. If you're not coaching people, you're not going to be good at it. And I mean, these are people, again, we've seen this as people in the CrossFit, this CrossFit company's gotten huge, right? So, and it's no disrespect. I don't even, if you want to be a great business owner and like coaching isn't your thing, I got zero beef with that whatsoever. Like if you want to be a great affiliate owner and you like running the business and doing all the marketing and you want to hire a great trainer to come in and kind of run your coaching development, like all the more power to you. Like, you don't know, not everybody has to be a coach, but if you're going to call yourself, you know, a great trainer and coach, like those are skills that need to be developed on a daily basis. And it needs to be done with high quality intentions and high quality repetitions.
And like we spoke about earlier, just also that it needs to be nurtured. Yeah. I love that you're at Fort Vancouver because of those reasons. Like knowing how long have you been instructing?
I started as a trainer in 2004. So
right. So closing on 20 years. Yeah. And then on top of that, and then like formal education for it.
Yeah.
And then how long have you been instructing level 1, level 2s?
Since 2009.
Right. And then
how many of those have you done?
Yeah.
Close to 300.
Yeah. And now you're administering level 4s.
Evaluating it.
Yeah. So all of that time, all of those years, and a year and a half out of volume leading a class, and you were able to recognize and identify that you needed to increase volume because it had decreased, and we're able to make that change. I mean, that's as awesome as it gets. You know?
Well, I think, and honestly, some of that's a testament to you guys. Like I'm very fortunate with how many people I've been able to surround myself in the community, and but I feel like there's a lot of coaches that, you know, like you guys are the, you know, tip of the spear when it comes to, like, you guys are in the gym every day, all day. Like, and if you really want to be that great of a coach, it's just what it is. And that's not what it needs to be for everybody. But if that's what you want to be, like, you live in the gym. Like, again, your identity is what your daily actions are. Like, are you going into the gym? Are you coaching people on a daily basis? Are you putting good effort into those people? Are you preparing with, you know, lesson plans at night, the night before all the stuff that you got going on the following day? Like, are you reflecting? Are you analyzing what you did well, what you didn't do well? You know, those are all processed. And for me, I think, you know, that's actually made me a lot better. Like, I get to watch other coaches. I'm like, I like how they did. I really like how they did that, but I didn't like this. And then when I start doing it myself, I start recognizing, oh, wait, I'm doing exactly what I told them not to do. You know, so the ability to, you know, assess somebody, give somebody feedback. What did you like? What they did well? What were some things that you would change? And you got to do that to yourself. Like, if you're just mindlessly going through, like, these are my classes, here's what my lesson plan is, I'm just going to kind of mindlessly run through it, then you're not ever going to really be able to achieve, I think, you know, if you really want to be the best, you're not going to be able to achieve those levels.
You know, so Chris, it's one of those things where, you know, like the three of us are different coaches, right? And we have things that obviously cross over that we're going to be very similar at and good and very, you know, good at some of the same things, and we're good at different things. I always believe, like, I look at that, I don't think there's a best in anything. I think, like, you're in the top 1% or you're not in the top 1%, or your top 1/4%, whatever it is. But as far as the best goes, what is that? You know, like Chris's background in educating coaches, he has a lot more time and a lot more education in that area than I do. And, you know, there could be an area that, like, you know, Jesse's better than me, or maybe an area that I'm better than Jesse. But the thing is, like, I might have an area that Jesse's a little bit better than me, but maybe I mentally connect with that athlete better for whatever reason. Maybe we had a similar upbringing or similar background, or for whatever reason we just click, or vice versa with Jesse or Chris. And so, you know, the discipline and the matter and the mental capacity comes down to stay in your wheelhouse and what means something to you. Don't get excited because someone else on this other end is really good at something that you're not. If it's not something you're passionate about, don't try to catch them. You never will. If they are that passionate about it, they will stay ahead of you. And then you're just going to dilute yourself and not be as good at what you're passionate about, and never as good as what they are, right? So if, like, you only like powerlifting, or you only like CrossFit, or you only like Olympic lifting, that's fine. Gymnastics, it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is you find out what your niche is. Where do you get to surround yourself with the best people? What means the most to you, and what do you feel like you have the most to offer from? Now hone that in. And that's discipline, not to have an ego and say, okay, well, Chris is getting really good at this, so I'm going to go dabble over here really and try to catch up real quick. And then, oh, I know Jesse's getting really good at this, so I'm going to go over here and get good. No, no, no. It doesn't work out that way. Okay. Figure out what you want to be, what means the most to you, where you're the highest capable at, and you have the most opportunity to improve people and go farther down the rabbit hole than anybody out there. And you don't have to go down a different rabbit hole. Just stay down yours. You can't go farther down the rabbit hole than anybody else. If you start jumping out and going down a different one once in a while, it'll never work out for you. Okay. So, I asked Chris that question for a reason. He's an expert at that. His background's above mine in that, and don't be afraid to say someone's better than you at something, especially when they put a hell of a lot more time in that arena than you have. Like that's a problem if you can't admit that. Okay. And that's leading to your downfall if you can't admit that, The thing is, I don't need to learn what Chris knows. I need to ask him so I can help people out, or I can point people in his direction. I don't need to take that on. I can hand it over to Chris. I can hand stuff over to Jesse. We talk to each other on the phone, and if we need something, we know who to get a hold of, and we know that we can do it. It's not a problem. Don't be worried about that. Stay in your lane. Put your head down. Get disciplined in what you need to do, because it's a lack of discipline to jump out of your rabbit hole and look down another one and go all over the place. Have the discipline to put your blinders on and go. Drop your head and go and learn. When you have gone farther down the rabbit hole than anybody else, you have more to offer people. Okay. And that's when you can say, maybe now I'm at that top 1%.
You're always going to be stronger as a team and as a community. Like, I think it's the same thing that goes with like people, like trainers trying to diagnose injuries and stuff. Like, surround yourself with a team that you can trust, good physios and PTs, and then you can get good input from them. Like, hey, what are you seeing? Like, what do I need to be focusing on? If, that's not your job to figure that out. And you're going to waste too much time trying to learn. Like, PTs spend 4 years in school learning all that stuff. And then they spend their whole, like, we got a great PT at X Factor that I trust, very, explicitly with anything. And anything that comes up, send him his way. And I have a conversation with him, and I get smarter because I get to hear what he's doing. Like, he works with people 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, just working on rehabilitating and making injuries better. So, use those people as resources, and don't be afraid to not know it all. Especially in CrossFit, there's too many things to know.
I bring therapists in from out of the area that are top of the food chain for what they do. And, when I started personal training people, I had massage therapists and physical therapists and people that I would talk to clients that I have and say, okay, you have this problem going on. I suggest you go to this individual. Do you care if I sit in with, when they work on you? Yeah, no problem. No one ever said no. Went in, learned, and then I'd ask the therapist even like, hey, can you show me how to do that? And they would. And it wasn't because I was trying to replace the therapist. I'm like, hey, look, this is for if I'm in a competition, nobody's around that knows this type of techniques, and I need to fix the athlete to keep them in the game. As long as I'm in town, I'm not doing that. I'm referring them to that person, have that person work on them because they've gone farther down the rabbit hole. I just needed to learn enough and want to learn more about the body. And there's things I needed to learn to become a better coach. So, people like that are always willing to give you information, and you can learn a lot. But also, I stayed in my lane. At one point, I was like, man, it'd be kind of cool to go like to school for therapy and stuff, with what I know in my background, right? And so I'm all excited about that. I'm like, no, then I won't be as good of a coach as I was. And, it's like, sorry, I already picked my lane, and I'm far enough down that lane that I'm way ahead.
That's
we
funny.
Don't get excited, right? Anything physical output or mental output, we're like, hell yeah, I want to go down that. I want to become a psychologist for athletes. Like, I want to become a physical therapist. Like, sign me up for massage school. You're like, you want to learn everything. Like, where's the endurance stuff? Where's the stretching stuff?
Totally agree. We lean, the coaching staff with us lean heavily on our team of practitioners. Like, we've got a full team. So we've got 2 physios, 3 massage therapists, and a chiro that are operating out of a full-time clinic inside the gym space. And I mean, with that sort of stuff, there's a spot where, like, a key role for our coach is just being able to be like, hey, this is what seems like it's going on, but this is the person you want to talk to. And just being able to pass it off that professional who does have that layer deeper of knowledge. And then getting feedback from them, being like, hey, that person you sent in, they came in yesterday. This is what I saw, blah, blah, blah. They should avoid these things for the next week or so, and then look towards starting back with this. Here's some other opinions and options on things that they could do in the meantime. Great. And then we can execute on that. But that's that piece. I think one of my other notes I've got here is like teammates. So as an athlete, that's the people that you would train with day in, day out. I mean, Chris earlier was mentioning that when you got back in the gym for morning, you found some people, pulled them in, and made that happen. I mean, I lean heavily on, Corey, who I train with at nights, and Sue as well, who have just been consistent for a long time now, as well as, having those text threads with the guys that also do the lifting, and just that like banter back and forth of like, who did what and when. If you lift earlier in the day, there's a real chance you get beat by 2.5 pounds by the person who lifts at the end of the day. All of those sort of things like makes a really big difference. And I think sometimes people come in the gym and they're like, well, I don't really know anyone, or I don't have any friends. You're like, you don't need friends. You need teammates.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be the same thing.
Yeah.
But you've got to be really thoughtful, because sometimes friends are not helpful at all. Like they can be, I've got lots of friends outside of the gym who would be like keen to know what I'm doing with life. How are things going? But don't really necessarily care either way if I'm making positive changes in my coaching, my strength, those sort of factors. So if I'm trying to be better and move forward productively, I mean, you need teammates who are going to help hold you accountable, help you with those rules that you've set. Text you and be like, hey, we're putting our briefs on. Where the fuck are you? Yep. And it's like, no, I'm coming. Just like, give me 5 more minutes, and who expect you to be there. And those sort of people, like, I mean, they could be people from the rest of your life, or they could be people you only see at the gym. I mean, I think with that West Side versus the World documentary, some of those guys talked about actually not even knowing each other's first names, just because they just knew their nickname, or didn't know that they're like, oh, this person I've trained with, every week in, week out, they're married. You're like, oh, who knew? And that's maybe not, that I'm not sure that's a requirement, but it is really important, I think, to ask yourself, do I have valuable teammates that I can lean on? And you guys for that, for sure. Adam working with Justin Ellie Trista is that for sure. Like, people who hold me accountable to be like, I can't put in some slop programming and pass it off, because it's embarrassing. So I do have to put in my best effort. I do have to be accountable to those people that I surround myself with. And I think that's a huge piece that can sort of assist with being able to be successful at becoming better than you currently are.
When I was younger, I thought I was a good training partner, but I was absolutely a horrible training partner. Because when I was young, at my age as a teenager, my knowledge base was like a fraction of a percent compared to what it is now. But compared to other kids in high school, my education was actually really, really good when it came to strength training, And so I would, for my weight, I lifted a lot of weight in school. People always wanted to lift, wanted to lift with me. For me, I thought I was good because I would educate them on what I knew and try to make them the best lifter I could. At the same time, it was just like, hey, man, like, you're here to be a training partner of mine. So if you slow me up, like, you're out of the way. And I would run people into the ground because in my mind, like, I train intense, and I wanted to train intense enough where, I was a young kid. I was stupid enough at the time to believe like the person who trains the hardest is going to win. So I wanted to out-train everybody. So I'd run training partners in the ground like, oh, well, couldn't keep up with me. Like, you weren't mentally in the right spot. Like, so be it. You didn't want it bad enough. And that's kind of how I thought. And I thought I was a good training partner because, like, I would make sure gave them a good handoff, and I'd pay attention to them and help them with technique, and I'd tell them why we're doing what we're doing. And I thought that was a good training partner. It's like, no, I was giving them some education, but ultimately I didn't care about their goals. I cared about my goals. And if they couldn't keep up, boom, they're gone. And in all honesty, every time I kept kicking a training partner to the side, and I didn't have to kick them to the side, they left. Every time I did that, it kind of like empowered me, where I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I went through everybody at school. No one could keep up with me. Like, I'm just going to like keep hammering down. That wasn't the right way to look at it, and then it was to the point where I didn't have any training partners. And then it was like, I love not having training partners. Training partners are a weakness. They show up late. They do this, they do that. If they show up late, screw them. I'm not going to wait for them, and I'm going to be irritated. And then my mind's not wrapped around where I'm at, where I need to be to lift what I need to lift. And so then it was one of those things where I like, yeah, you need a training partner. I don't need a training partner. Like, I don't have a training partner because I don't have anybody who's going to keep up with me, is like kind of was my thought process, Then I went to Westside Barbell, and here, like, I have an immense respect for Louis Simmons, and Louis, like, training partners are everything. Like, he's like, I don't know, coaches have training partners. Now, he did have coaches because, if you ask Lou from like the 80s on, every squat he ever did, he had a world record holder in the squat watching his technique and critiquing him. And he was critiquing other world record holders every day for, since the early 80s, right? And so you look at like, wow, okay. Then you start thinking like, okay, well, if you go to a gym and, it's like, let's say you have 5 training partners in your group and you're all in the same weight class. And it's like, okay, well, I'm number 6 in the world. And well, I have number 1 through 5 in front of me. Well, to be number 1, I got to beat number 5 first, and he's my training partner, so I got to beat him. Well, if I beat him, then I want to be number 4. Well, he's my training group. And the one cool thing I liked at Westside is, Louis instilled this was like, if you're number 1 in the world, you're trying to teach number 2 to beat you. You're doing everything you can to get them to beat you, but you're also doing everything you can to stay ahead of them. You're not staying ahead of them because you don't teach them things, because you don't clue them in on knowledge, because you don't try to make them better. You realize that, if I want to be the first 1,200-pound squatter, but my training partner beats me there, well, that's okay, because I can come back and hit the next meet and go 12:05 and beat his world record. So if it takes him proving that 1,200 can be done, that's fine, because at the end of the day, it's just the biggest squat I can get in my lifetime is what's important to me. So if if I had to teach someone to beat me to get me to go to another level, and in my mind, personally, I would rather be a 1,200-pound squatter and have 5 people ahead of me than be an 1,100-pound squatter and be number 1. It sounds funny. Like, I want to be number 1, but at the same time, like, if I can have people around me and I can go to another level than I never would have gone, so be it. It's just one of those things. So then it's like, I started realizing training partners are extremely important, but it's how we handle our partners. And, I always want to try to get people to beat me, but I also want to do everything I can in my power to beat them. And so now when I was training on my own in the middle of the day, because everybody's working during that time, and that's the best time to train as a personal trainer, because technically you think it's the best time because you have no clients to get at that time because everybody's at work, but ultimately then you have no training partners. So I haven't had a training partner in an extremely long time. And so when I decided to change my training time to the morning, first thing I did was call a guy that I know is the most disciplined person that I have. And that's my training partner. And we don't miss days. And if one of us is having an off day, it doesn't matter because the other one notices it and they drop the hammer. If you're exhausted that day and you're yawning, like, the other person's going to, up the ante and they're just going to go. Right. And that's exactly what I need. So, the whole training partner thing is extremely important from the discipline aspect and the mental aspect, but you're only going to get out of it what you put in it. So do everything you can to get that person to beat you. And I watch people like, you talk like Lou, it's like Chuck Vogelpohl, his training partner was Matt Dimmel. Well, Matt broke his neck, come back from training, and it's like, okay, think about where you're going to train. Lou's like, back with Matt. Why? Because you're 2 strongest guys in the gym. So that's who your training partner is. Doesn't matter you broke your neck. And you know what? Chuck went and trained with him. Do you think you like the guy? Do you think you like what happened in the situation? No. But Chuck was a world record holder for a reason. He didn't do what was comfortable. He did what was necessary. And that was part of what was necessary. And I guarantee it fueled him to pull more weight and squat more weight than they ever had, because you think the guy that did that to him, do you think he wants them beating him? So ultimately, our training partners can come in many different aspects and ways. You just have to decipher through how to pick the correct one and how to handle them correctly and treat them correctly to get where you need to go.
Yeah, that Louis run with the lame, develop a limp. There, has a inverse to that of, even if you're the weakest in a, pack of wolves, you're still wolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's worth thinking about. I mean, I train with Corey, and I mean, the goal, whether it's squat or bench press, is try to get within 100 pounds of what he gets. And these days, I can't. I work at it every time. It's like it's maximum effort. I'll close that gap as much as possible, and I never let that sort of like deter me from just be like, oh man, I just can't beat this guy. I was like, doesn't matter. Like, every session's another chance to try to make that gap as small as possible. And every bunch of weeks when deadlift comes up, that's my opportunity.
Yeah.
And this, that sort of piece where like I'm counting on that. And I would say the other side of it is also like making sure you're not the biggest fish in the pond also shows you what's possible. I mean, if you squat in a gym where the heaviest deadlift is 500 pounds, how long is it going to take you to get to 600 pounds? A lot longer than if you lift in a gym where 10 guys squat 500 pounds or 600 pounds or more. Like you adapt to the environment. And I think that inside of the things we've talked about today, when we talk about like setting rules, the team and the people you train with matter, the community matters, that you don't get in your own way. I think the other side of that is the environment matters.
Mm-hmm. Well, ultimately, most likely you will never become a 600-pound deadlifter if the highest deadlifter in your gym is 500 pounds, because no one has a roadmap how to get to 6. If they did, there'd be a 600-pound puller in your gym, So ultimately, like, yes, your atmosphere gets addressed by your discipline. Your discipline puts you in front of people. When you have discipline for long enough periods of times, you're going to ride the high of your momentum from being excited about things and having that good, motivation, but ultimately you don't keep partners on temporary motivation. You keep them on permanent discipline. So you keep that permanent discipline. It allows you to have training partners that are around you that are better. And then you guys ride each other's highs on on momentum from those times that you get excited and seeing different people do different things. But ultimately, for me, I picked a training partner. He weighs 100 pounds more than me. He's leaner than me. That's my training partner. And he hasn't missed the last 3 years. He hasn't missed a workout. So that's how I chose my training partner. Right. And, ultimately, I have this thing where I always say, if I had to take a fight in kickboxing and I had a choice, I could train with a middle of the road coach and middle of the road training partners, and I could train for 10 years and fight an opponent. Or I can fight the same opponent, but I have 2 years. But those 2 years, I'm with a kickboxing coach who's trained multiple world champions, and every one of my sparring partners is a world champion. I'll pick the 2 years all day long, because in 2 years, I'll be 10 times the fighter I ever would have been with the 10 years with someone else. Because these training partners and coaches, they say iron sharpens iron. Well, you know what? Iron stronger on that side. You think if you're fighting all world champions, well, they're fast, they got angles, they got multiple things. First thing you're going to need to learn to do is to make it back out of the ring to go home, right? So you're going to have to learn footwork quick. You're going to have to deal with that speed real quick. You're going to have to learn your defense real quick. You start getting some defense, take a little pressure off yourself, then you're going to learn, oh, a good offense is part of a good defense. All right, well, I got to get better at, I got to be able to have a higher accuracy of landing shots. And if you can start landing shots on world champions, probably going to fare pretty well when you get to your fight. Okay. So it's things like that. And, when I say make good decisions for yourself, that's decision. Hey, maybe down the road, you have a bunch of people who are really nice people who are okay at kickboxing. Then, maybe you have to drive 20 minutes farther one way to go train with the best in the world. What's your decision? I know what mine is.
Yeah, I feel it's a classic one in Ohio too. I feel like that's a story of like a ton of people who are like, oh, I just drove 2.5 hours each way for every training session just to be there. I think maybe the last thing on the list is the pieces of like having excuses and that sort of stuff. And I think everyone can identify that excuses are just, I hope everyone can identify that it's just not ideal. I would always say, to those I work with the closest, that no one cares about your excuses as much as you do. Like, you might share your excuses with other people and they're like, yeah, for sure. They don't care. What did my sister say? Like 80% of people don't care about your problems. Other 20% are glad you have them. Mm-hmm. The excuses of like just being like, being able to listen to someone be like, oh, just like I work in the, for us, I work in the city, so I commute, I get home kind of late. For every person who's got that excuse, I've got someone else in the gym who's like making it happen, who's just like, you've got those people who are like, 3 kids under the age of 4 who, are just like, yep, I figured out how to do this. I'm going to go do this. My partner comes home. We got a 45-minute transition. So I'm going to zip down. I don't have like the full hour, but if I can come and get 30 minutes in, that's what I'm going to do. Like, what would you recommend? Like, there's always one of those people who, instead of, giving the reason for why it can't work and the things that they don't have, genetics, those sort of things, it's always a surprise to me with the people I've had an opportunity to work with, Justin, Jamie, these people who are making it and successful. I mean, I've never heard any of them talk about genetics, and I don't think it's because, well, they've got them. The biggest thing I notice that separates those top tier athletes from the next tier and the tier below and everyone else is actually something that's quite reasonable. It's just attitude, behavior, discipline. Like it's those things. Justin is going to make the best choice about when he's going to go to bed. He's not going to stay up and binge watch Yellowstone for 3 or 4 episodes on a weeknight. It's not appropriate, because it doesn't fit in line with what he's trying to accomplish. And I don't think you need to have ambitions of being the best in the world to implement or execute on those pieces. I just think it's the same pieces of being like, I'm trying to make a positive change. All he's trying to do is make a positive change. And, the mantra in the group is, is he better today than he was a year ago?
All that's great. And it's 100% dead on, it's just, one of those things for a long time too, for me as a coach, I was putting a lot of time and effort into people that was a waste of time. And what I mean by that is they just weren't willing to put into themselves what I put into them. And then the older I get, the more I'm like, man, time is the only thing I can't get back. It's precious. And if I'm spending too much time with this person, I could have helped someone else, or I could have had a better quality of life for myself. And everybody who walks the door, it's 100% to improve their quality of life, whether a games champion or someone who just wants to be healthy, it doesn't matter. So what Jesse's saying is 100% right, that it is not the level of what you want to compete at. It is the level of quality of life that you want and how do you get there. And a lot of people want to have excuses and, well, no one's willing to help me. Is that you're doing? Because I can tell you right now that I used to help and help too much really for people. And the people that I had to help and do everything for, they never panned out and they went away and they always had poor result. And then it got to the point where I'm like, screw it. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm putting as much effort into that person as they put into themselves. I think that's a very fair way to do it. And I tell people that, when I meet them, like, okay, what's your goals? Here's my goals. Okay, we can get there, but here's what we're going to do. I'll put as much effort into you as you put into yourself. And so if you want to go all the way, I'll go all the way, as long as you put that effort in, and then because you have some people who will use the excuse like, man, I can't get help. I can't do this, or I don't know how to do this, or, where am I going to learn this from? It's like, did you burn that bridge? Were you undisciplined? Did you not show up when you're supposed to? Did you half-ass try? If someone's willing to give your time, give 100% of your being in whatever that task is, I'm not saying what your goal should be, but I'm saying how your execution should be, and that person will feel respected from that, and they'll be more willing to help you, and they'll get excited because your results will be at the highest level it can be. And the better your results are, the more excited people like us get. And the more you do for yourself and the better quality of life, the more you improve the quality of life, the more excited people like us get. So you want us on your side, you want us excited, you want the best results from us, give the best results that you can to yourself and put that effort in yourself. And people like us will be there. If people like us aren't surrounding you, you're probably making the wrong decisions. Okay. Don't say because you weren't lucky, because, I used to go around and say, oh man, I've been really lucky to go to Westside. I was really lucky. These other athletes taught me things growing up. Or lucky here, lucky there. I'm like, no, wait a minute. If I say lucky, all these other coaches that I'm teaching a seminar to are going to wait for their luck to happen. It's called luck. It very rarely happens. How many times have you won the lottery? It's very rare to just get lucky, right? And if you do, great, awesome. But I'm not going to wait on luck. I'm going to have discipline, do my job. And if I do my job long enough, people will recognize that quality in me. And then they will like to spend time around me, so they don't mind offering to help me and level me up, because I might be one more training partner for them, or one more set of eyes that can help out, because I was disciplined enough to learn what they needed me to learn. Okay. And I found that the highest caliber of individual and knowledge is just waiting for someone else who's willing to put the effort in to teach them. Okay. So if you're not getting the information you want, take a look at yourself. All right.
I think we buttoned it up there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a good, just overarching theme. Everybody's looking for the perfect programming, and I'm going to follow Mayhem. I'm going to go to the games, or this special mobility exercise, or this accessory lift. And at the end of the day, it's, effort, consistent efforts, and obviously having a good game plan. But if you don't have that first, the plan's not going to matter. You gotta have the discipline to get it done first.
100%. Cool.
Okay. I think actually to wrap it up, the only thing I'm going to say to finish out is if you have listened to this and you have any feedback, we'd love to hear it. Reach out, touch base. If you have questions, reach out, touch base. If you have things you'd like to hear us talk about, let us know. We've got a bunch of lists of ideas and things like that. We are trying as hard as we can to pull these podcasts together. Rallying all three of us to the same place at the same time can have variation through the year. And then on top of that, once we get it kind of recorded, editing and everything else, that's my fault. So we've recorded this on the 21st of July. I'm going to try super hard to have this out before I head off to the games. So before the 30th, we'll see. But let us know. Let us know if there's stuff that you'd like to hear. And otherwise, thank you for listening.
Conjugate Nation Podcast.